Hey everybody, thanks for watching my video today. I will be going over the Science Museum of London. My name is Erica Gibb and I'll be taking you on this journey. So first up, the first thing we gotta know, where is it located? If you guessed London, you are correct. Um, the Science Museum is actually, we'll take a closer look here, 5 miles away from the Tower of London. Now, the Science Museum of London may not be the most popular places. It's not like people are talking about the Queen's home or the castle or the Capitol or anything, but the Science Museum is the headquarters of Britain's science museum group. It's considered one of the greatest museums of science and technology. It's it's located in South Kensington. It's also near the Natural History Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum. Now, the Victoria and Albert Museum is part of the history of the Science Museum, which we will cover here in just a moment. Um, so we'll start at the beginning, as all origin stories start. So in 1851, the Science Museum was born during the Great Exhibition. Now, the Great Exhibition was like this whole block, it was like this whole blocks of just exhibits of historical pieces. It was mainly art and science. Um, Queen Victoria laid foundations in 1899 to have buildings built to display these pieces for the public because people seeing these things, it was just so popular that it brought in a huge financial surplus. So Prince Albert, who was their patron, decided to found a bunch of educational establishments in Kensington. So again, in 1899, Queen Victoria, she laid the foundations for these buildings, but she really, really liked her art collections. And by collections, it just means the pieces that these museums hold and different subcategories of just their historical stuff. Um, so the science and engineering was kind of lumped into the art collections, and the building that was made to be that museum, that was what was called the Victoria and Albert Museum. But in 1909, the science and engineering, they finally got their independence from the art collections. And unofficially, they had been calling themselves the Science Museum, but they could finally officially adopt the Science Museum name. Now, because of this new found independence, there had to be some founders. And here are her qualified founders. They didn't actually found the museums, but they were huge impacts on getting the science to separate from the art. So Norman Lockyer, he's this dude here on the left. He's described as the main founder of the Science Museum. He was the founder and editor of a journal called Nature, and he was an association. He worked with all the different museums starting in 1876. He was also very persistently lobbying for the Science Museum to be independent from the Art Museum. He would go around to the basically the British government and telling them why they needed to be different. They needed to be separate and have their own place, and they weren't the same as art pieces. Now, he didn't do it by himself. He was helped by Robert Morant. It's this gentleman here on the right. He engineered the separation from the Victoria and Albert Museum. So he kind of worked on the he worked on the outside, and Mr. Locker, he worked on the inside. Now, the next thing one has to know is the purpose of the Science Museum London. Like, why was it important? Why are they even here? I found this really cool quote that I thought portrayed the idea very well. The Science Museum's displays are concerned with the presentation of science and its application to industry and everyday life, both historically and from a contemporary viewpoint. So they're saying they're presenting the science and how it's used in both, industry and everyday life, showing how like looking at this stuff historically can help us understand why stuff works, how it works, what does it do for us on an everyday scale, and how we can take that and look to the future. And now looking to the future doesn't come until way later, but the seeds of the idea are there. Yeah, and so originally the Science Museum was for industrial and decorative art. They had miscellaneous science collections like building materials and food and whatnot, just a whole bunch of different stuff. So this right here is kind of what the entrance looked like or would have looked like way back when it was still just newly built and stuff. Nothing too fancy compared to today. But back then, this was a really new thing, and everyone was just like super excited for it. So eventually, Science Museum had to move. In 1910, a year after they separated from the Victoria and Albert Museum, they focused on getting their own building. They couldn't be like, we're separate from the art and then stay in the same building. They had to get their own place. They grew up. So the Bell Committee made a bunch of recommendations for like designs and what would go into these buildings. And their recommendations have actually been influences on museums like ever since. And we're talking this is like 1910. This is like a over 110 years ago now. So the first block, because they did these in blocks. The East Block was the first block, and they started building it in 1913, but it wasn't actually opened until 1923 because of World War One. They had a whole lot of setbacks in building and completing and designing all of these new museums because of World War One. But in the end, obviously they got them built. Now, the next thing that they kind of created, they invented it to help bring in more people, to bring in the masses, was the children's gallery. So you go to a museum today and there's a lot of like interactive pieces and stuff that you can actually pick up and get tactile with it, get look at it, see how it works. Well, when these museums were first built, they just had these giant sheets, these almost essays written for each piece, and it was really suited for people who were experts. It was suited for the doctors, people with their doctorates who had been studying this stuff for years, who had just had an intimate knowledge of what this stuff was. So in 1931, Colonel Sir Henry Lyons, who was the director of the museum at the time, he opened what's called a children's gallery. And his goal was just to better engage children and the average visitor. So someone going in and seeing this stuff wasn't just like, that's a lot of words. I'm not going to read that. And then not learn anything, which was the goal of these museums. So we know we have the children's gallery, but how about some of the past famous exhibitions? So these are some, not all of, but these are some of the bigger ones that they have there from the past. There's the 1876, the Special Loan Collection of Scientific Instruments. These instruments formed a basis of scientific collections that became international and like internationally important. Um, in 1991, they displayed Charles Babbage's difference engine. Uh, in 2002, they finally finished the engine, and then they digitized it to further research it. There's also the Alan Turing computer, Helen Sharman's spacesuit, and the Wells Cathedral clock. These, and again, these are just some of the historical pieces that they have there. They have like a whole lot more. But then it's 2024. We've got the past. We also need the current exhibitions, which some of them actually look towards the future. So, as I mentioned earlier, nowadays museums have and they have interactive stuff. A lot of museums will have an IMAX. You go in and watch the with the dome screens and 4D and everything. But the Science Museum of London, they have this whole list of different exhibitions that are more modern. It includes this Turn It Up, The Power of Music, where you can go in and see how music and science work together. And you can even like go in and create music. Honestly, this is the one I'm most excited for. I love music. But it ranges just from like there's gaming, the energy revolutions, the Winton Gallery. They even have an exhibition on AI, on how it can help us with our health. So, of course, after all of that, it's a lot of stuff to take in, especially in just 12, 13 minutes that we have together today. We'll get a broad overview. So, the Science Museum was founded in 1851, and it showcases historic pieces from 1750 to today. They've moved buildings, they've gotten many upgrades. They were founded in 1851 but gained independence in 1909, and now they're host to both historic mathematic items and new futuristic items. One of the coolest things is they look to the past, they learn from the past and retain what they have, and they document history, but they're also looking to the future. They're looking, well, how can we use this to help with air pollution, or how can we use this to better ourselves? Which it's just really cool. I hope y'all find it as cool as I do. So, one last fact before we head out for the day. So, their sources of funding, it's really just like any other museum. They get their money from the shops, cafes, ticket sales, but they also have a bunch of foundations and donors, people who just donate because they share the same passions. And right here on the right is their percentage of income by sector. So if that's something you can interest, there's a pause button. Feel free to check it out. But anyways, here are my sources for you guys. And thank you so much for listening, guys. I know I like to ramble. I'm sorry if my voice sounds awful today. Allergy season is killing me, but thank you for sticking it through. And if you put this on times 2 speed, I do not blame you. Later, guys.